Before the internet, before telephones, before radio, there was the telegraph, a machine that changed the world. Messages once carried for days by horse could now travel across America in seconds. And in the middle of the 19th century, telegraph operators held one of the most respected and important jobs in the country. But there was one problem. It was a profession almost completely closed to Black Americans. Yet in a small town in northeastern Ohio, one man broke through that barrier. His name was Charles Burnham Leek, a forgotten pioneer, the first African-American telegraph operator in America, a man whose skill, intelligence, and courage earned him respect in an era when most Black Americans were denied opportunity, dignity, and equal treatment. And somehow, his story nearly disappeared from history. Until now.
Chapter 1. Born from Slavery to Possibility. Charles Burnham Leek's story begins with his father. John L. Leek was born into slavery near Richmond, Virginia. At the age of 21, he was freed by his enslaver. Like many newly freed Black Americans searching for opportunity, John traveled north. Eventually, he settled in Rhode Island, where he married a woman named E. Rodman. Together, they had 3 children: Charles, William, and Clara. Charles Burnham Leek was born on September 28, 1850, in Peacedale, Rhode Island. But when he was only 3 years old, the family moved again, this time to Ashtabula, Ohio. And that move would change everything. Ashtabula County was unlike many places in America at the time. It was a strong abolitionist community. In fact, historical records show that Ashtabula County was the only county in Ohio that never returned a captured African American back into slavery before or during the Civil War. This was a place where the Underground Railroad thrived, a place where freedom had defenders. And in that environment, young Charles Leek would grow into a remarkable man. Chapter 2. The Telegraph Prodigy. Charles grew up helping his father run the Lakeshore Depot restaurant near the railroad station in Ashtabula. It was there that he met a man who would change his life forever. John P. Manning, the head of telegraph operations in Ashtabula. Manning saw something in the young Charles Leek: intelligence, discipline, curiosity, and ambition. On May 18, 1869, at just 19 years old, Charles Leek was hired as a messenger boy in the telegraph office. But Manning did more than give him a job. He became his mentor. He personally trained Charles in telegraph operations. And what happened next stunned everyone. Charles mastered telegraphy in only 5 weeks, a Lakeshore and Michigan Southern Railroad record. Within 2 months, he became a full-time telegraph operator. And with that achievement, Charles Burnham Leek became the first African-American telegraph operator in the United States. Think about what that meant in 1869, only 4 years after the Civil War. At a time when Black Americans were still fighting for basic rights, Charles Leek entered one of the most technical and respected professions in America. And he excelled.
He worked stations throughout northeastern Ohio: Saybrook, Geneva, Perry, Nottingham, Girard, Conneaut, Kingsville. Everywhere he went, he built a reputation for excellence. But Charles Leek wasn't satisfied with simply making history himself. He trained 2 other Black telegraph operators, Albert Richardson and Garrett Richardson. In an era when opportunities for African Americans were severely restricted, Charles Leek was opening doors for others. Chapter 3. The Ashtabula Train Disaster. Then came the night that would define Charles Leek's career. December 29, 1876. The Ashtabula Train Disaster, one of the deadliest railroad disasters in American history. During a brutal winter storm, a railroad bridge collapsed beneath the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern Railway passenger train. The train plunged into the icy ravine below. Then, fire broke out. The disaster killed approximately 92 people. And in the chaos that followed, communication became critical. At just 26 years old, Charles Leek remained at his telegraph station alongside John Manning for nearly 50 straight hours. No sleep, no breaks, constantly sending and receiving emergency messages. Messages to Cleveland, messages from railroad officials, messages from desperate families searching for loved ones. For 7 days, the telegraph office became the nerve center of the tragedy. Reporters flooded the town. Families arrived searching for survivors. Government officials demanded updates. And telegrams poured in non-stop. So many telegrams were sent that at one point, the Western Union office in Ashtabula held nearly $700 in receipts. An enormous amount of money for the time. But more importantly, Charles Leek proved himself under unimaginable pressure. Reliable, professional, essential. The railroad now knew exactly what kind of man he was.
Chapter 4. Breaking Racial Barriers. As the years passed, Charles Leek's flawless record earned him something almost unheard of for a black man in the late 1800s: authority. When John Manning was transferred to another position, Charles Leek was promoted to head of telegraph operations at the Ashtabula Depot. No African American had ever reached such a position within the railroad system. And even more remarkably, white telegraph operators worked under him. In the 19th century, that was almost unthinkable. But Charles Leek's skill and reputation commanded respect. Not fear, not resentment, respect. Then, in 1886, Charles made another bold decision. He married Ida Adeline Britt, a white Irish immigrant woman. At the time, interracial marriage was still illegal or socially condemned in many parts of America. Ohio would not formally legalize interracial marriage until 1887. Yet the people of Ashtabula largely accepted the couple. The community respected Charles Leek for who he was: a hard-working man, a gifted musician, a respected professional, a husband and father. Together, Charles and Ida raised 3 children: Clarence, Edna, and Elizabeth. And Charles passed his telegraph knowledge down to the next generation. His son Clarence would later become a telegraph operator himself.
Chapter 5. The Musician and Community Leader. But Charles Leek was more than a railroad man. He was also an accomplished musician. He played multiple instruments, including the violin. He composed music. He taught lessons. And for nearly 20 years, he led Leeks Orchestra. Music became another way Charles connected with the community. Another way he crossed barriers in an America still deeply divided by race. People remembered him not just for his intelligence, but for his kindness, his patience, and his ability to teach. Whether in a telegraph office or a music hall, Charles Leek became a symbol of excellence. Yet today, very few people know his name.
Chapter 6. The Final Years. In 1900, Charles Leek's health began to decline. He stepped away from telegraph work and focused on running the family restaurant his father had built decades earlier. He hoped to oversee the new restaurant planned for the new Ashtabula Depot. But fate had other plans. On the evening of May 18, 1901, exactly 32 years after beginning his railroad career, Charles Leek left the restaurant with his wife in a horse-drawn carriage. Suddenly, he collapsed from a heart attack. He died before medical help could arrive. Charles Burnham Leek was 51 years old. He was buried in Chestnut Grove Cemetery in Ashtabula, Ohio. And slowly, his story faded from public memory.
Conclusion. The man history almost forgot. For more than a century, Charles Burnham Leek remained hidden in the pages of history. Not in museums, not in classrooms, not in documentaries, but buried in an old railroad history book discovered late one night by researchers determined to uncover forgotten stories. And what they found was extraordinary.
the son of a formerly enslaved man, who rose to become the first black telegraph operator in America, a railroad leader, a mentor, a musician, a barrier breaker, and proof that even during America's darkest periods, there were individuals who challenged expectations and changed history. Charles Burnham Leek did not become famous. He did not become wealthy. But he became something just as important: a pioneer. And now, more than 120 years after his death, his voice is finally being heard again.
Coming next on the Hidden Black Legacy Project. Charles Leek broke barriers with technology. But what if I told you another black pioneer helped build America itself? Born in 1731, with almost no formal education, he became an astronomer, a mathematician, and a man whose work helped shape the nation's capital. Next time on the Hidden Black Legacy Project, Benjamin Banneker, the self-taught genius who helped build America. The story doesn't end here. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to the Hidden Black Legacy Project. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode and help bring hidden history to light.